The shuttle glided silently through space, its smooth silver body reflecting the pale light of distant stars. Dr. Alara Miles sat near the window, watching as the massive orbital station Ethra came into view. It hovered above Earth's dead surface like a quiet sentinel, wrapped in cold metal and humming with alien energy. Alara's fingers tightened around the armrests. She had read about the Varelians, a race of highly intelligent, emotionless beings who studied galaxies with cold precision. They didn't believe in feelings. To them, emotions were irrational glitches in an otherwise perfect system. But Alara knew better. Emotions were what made her human. They were not flaws. They were the reason people survived wars, loved deeply, and kept going when everything else failed. The shuttle docked with a soft clang. As the doors opened, she took a deep breath and stepped onto the station. The air was clean, but cold. The halls were lit with a sterile blue glow. Everything was made of smooth, white-gray metal. There were no paintings, no windows, no sounds. Only silence and machines. A tall figure approached. His skin was pale blue, eyes solid black, hands long and thin. He wore a simple silver robe. "I am Scholar Trell," he said, voice calm and flat. "You are Dr. Alara Miles." She nodded. "Yes, it's an honor to be here." "There is no honor," he said. "Only purpose." That was their way. No greetings, no warmth. Only facts. Trell turned and led her down a long hallway. As they walked, Alara saw other Varelians moving quietly, quickly, all without speaking. They didn't glance at her. No curiosity, no interest. She felt like a strange animal in a glass cage. "You have been brought to assist our research on Terran emotional systems," Trell said without looking back. "We have examined your written records. Your cultures are chaotic, illogical, yet persistent. Emotions are what helped us survive," Alara replied softly. "They're not just impulses. They are strength." Trell stopped and turned toward her. "That is precisely what we aim to test." He brought her to a small room. It had a bed, a desk, and one chair. No color, no softness, just metal and silence. "You will begin tomorrow," he said. "Do not leave the assigned areas." She wanted to ask where the others were, if any humans were left. But Trell had already walked away. Alara sat on the bed and opened her small travel case. Inside were the few things she had been allowed to bring. A worn photo of her parents, a leather notebook, and a small music player. She pressed play. A soft piano melody filled the room. The sound felt like home. It reminded her of rain on metal roofs, warm blankets, and her mother humming in the kitchen. She closed her eyes. The music filled the sterile space, soft and alive. For the first time since arriving, she felt safe. But outside her door, invisible sensors were already recording her heart rate, brain activity, and facial movements. The Varelians were watching, listening, calculating. To them, this was not a moment of peace. It was data. Still, Alara whispered to herself, "They'll never understand unless they feel it." She didn't come to fight them. She came to show them something they had never known, not through force, but through presence, through feeling. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The next morning, a soft chime woke Alara from sleep. She opened her eyes slowly. The light in the room brightened gently, as if the station itself decided when morning began. There was no sun, no birdsong, no familiar sounds. Only the constant hum of machines, low and steady, like a heartbeat without feeling. A message flashed on the wall in clean white text. "Proceed to Research Bay 2. Alara dressed quickly and tucked her notebook into the pocket of her uniform. She ran a hand over her small music player before leaving it behind. The Varelians had already scanned it the night before. They called it primitive noise storage. She called it memory. As she walked through the long, curved corridors of the station, she passed more Varelians. None of them spoke. Their faces never changed. They moved with purpose, but without emotion. No surprise, no curiosity, no life in their expressions. Research Bay 2 was a large, circular room filled with holographic panels and soft, glowing consoles. At the center was a round platform with a chair, clearly designed for her. Trell was already there, tapping on a floating screen. Without looking at her, he said, "Please be seated. We will begin our baseline measurements." Alara sat, trying to relax. Her hands rested in her lap, but her heart beat a little faster. Trell gestured, and the platform lit up around her. Thin beams scanned her body. Dots of light flickered in the air as data appeared on the panels around the room. Your resting heart rate is elevated, Trell noted. Are you afraid? I'm curious, Alara replied. That is not measurable, he said flatly. We will observe your emotional triggers. Please describe your earliest memory of grief. Alara hesitated. Why grief? It produces strong neurological response. Begin. She closed her eyes. Images came back. The day her brother died in a shelter collapse. The silence afterward. Her mother's shaking hands. The small drawing he had left behind. A smiling sun and stick figures under it, labeled home. Her throat tightened. He was only 6. He loved drawing suns even when we hadn't seen the sky in years. A soft beep marked a spike in her brain activity. Trell did not respond. He simply logged the results. Later, he asked about love, about anger, about hope. Each time, Alara answered honestly, even though the questions were clinical. She told stories, described moments. But every word was measured by machines. Every reaction reduced to numbers. When the session ended, Trell spoke again. You are unusually expressive. Your responses suggest deeper emotional imprint than expected. Alara stood. It's called being human. Trell looked at her without blinking. That remains to be proven. As she turned to leave, a softer voice spoke from the corner of the room. Dr. Miles? She paused. A smaller Varelian stood there, holding a tablet. He was younger, maybe an assistant. His eyes were black like the others, but there was a strange flicker in them. Not emotion exactly, but something close. My name is Cav, he said. I am assigned to observe your cultural materials. She smiled gently. Then you're in for something new. Cav tilted his head. You speak with warmth. That is unusual. Warmth isn't just a temperature, she said. It's what makes people feel safe. Seen. Cav blinked slowly. Explain further? Alara pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. One of her brother's old drawings she always carried. She held it out. This was made by a child who lived underground. He drew the sun every day, even though he never saw it. Why? Because he felt something. He believed in something better. Cav took the paper carefully, eyes scanning every line. It is not logical. No, Alara agreed. It's emotional. Cav stood quietly for a long moment before whispering. Interesting. That one word stayed with Alara as she returned to her room. That night, she wrote in her notebook. Cav looked at the drawing longer than any data chart. Maybe they aren't as empty as they seem. Maybe they're just waiting to feel. As she closed the notebook, she heard a faint sound in the hallway. Soft footsteps. A pause. Then they were gone. She smiled to herself in the silence. Somewhere in this cold place, a spark had been lit. Days passed on the Ethra station, measured not by sunrise or sunset, but by the soft rhythm of chimes and glowing hallways. Alara settled into a strange routine, mornings filled with tests, afternoons of questioning, and evenings alone in her silent quarters. Each test became more intense. Trell and his team focused on her memories, her reactions, her expressions. They showed her images, war ruins, lost cities, faces of long-gone loved ones. They monitored every breath, every tear. They asked about pain, fear, love, and loss. Alara answered everything, even when it hurt. She knew this was more than research. It was survival of her identity, her humanity. One morning, she entered the chamber to find the chair replaced with a new machine. Sleek and silver, it curved around a headrest and hummed quietly. Trell stood beside it, hands folded behind his back. We are advancing the study, he said. This will measure and, briefly, suppress targeted emotional responses. It is safe. Mostly. Alara's stomach tightened. You want to shut off my feelings? Temporarily. To isolate reactions and understand how emotion influences Terran behavior. She looked at the machine. What happens if you turn off something I can't get back? Trell's face didn't change. That is part of the test. Before she could object, another figure entered, Cav. He carried a data pad, but looked directly at Alara. His eyes held something different now. A flicker of tension. You don't have to agree, he said quietly, almost too soft for Trell to hear. Trell turned. The subject has volunteered her cooperation as part of her agreement. We proceed. Alara glanced between them. Then, slowly, she stepped forward and sat in the chair. Cold metal touched the back of her neck. The device lowered, and her vision dimmed. A low pulse rang in her ears. Her thoughts slowed. The weight in her chest, that familiar pull of memory and feeling, began to dull. She could still think, but the thoughts felt empty. She remembered her brother, but felt nothing. She thought of her mother's laugh, but it meant nothing. She saw a sun in her mind, but it was just light. It was terrifying. She wanted to cry, but she couldn't. The tears wouldn't come. She wasn't numb. She was hollow. From the corner of the room, Kev stepped forward. "Stop the process," he said suddenly. Trell raised a brow. "This is within expected parameters." Kev's voice grew louder. "She is losing something essential." Trell looked back at Alara. Her face was still, eyes blank, lips slightly parted. "This is data," Trell replied. "We are closer to understanding the emotional code." "But at what cost?" Kev asked. Alara stared forward. Something inside her screamed, but she couldn't feel the scream. She couldn't even want to scream. And then, the machine powered down. The pulse stopped. Her breath caught. Like a dam breaking, emotion flooded back in. Grief, relief, sadness. She gasped, eyes wide, and began to cry. Deep, shaking sobs that echoed off the sterile walls. Trell watched her silently, then made a note on his tablet. "You have returned to normal parameters." "Fascinating." Alara struggled to stand. Her voice cracked. "Don't ever do that again." Trell tilted his head. "You chose to participate. I didn't choose to become nothing." Kev stepped beside her, offering his arm. She didn't need it, but she took it anyway. Later, back in her quarters, Kev sat across from her. He studied her face with an intensity that made her pause. "You said emotions are strength," he said quietly. "I didn't understand that until today." She nodded, wiping her face. "They make us human. They remind us we're alive." Kev looked down at the small drawing she had shown him before, her brother's son. "The others won't accept this easily." "I know," she said. "But maybe you will." Kev looked up again. "I don't feel like them anymore." "That's a beginning," Alara said gently. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew now that Cav was listening. And maybe, just maybe, feeling. Outside her room, the quiet sensors recorded their conversation. Trell read the transcript. He didn't react, but his eyes lingered on one line longer than the rest. "They make us human. They remind us we're alive." He closed the screen. The next test would be the most important yet. The air on Aethra felt different. Not warmer, not colder, just charged. Like something was about to break. Alara could sense it in the way Cav moved. He didn't speak much that morning, but he lingered by her side longer than usual, his eyes following her closely, as if waiting for something, or bracing for it. Trell had summoned her early. Earlier than usual. No message. No explanation. When Alara entered Research Bay 1, she saw the new machine immediately. It wasn't a scanner or a monitor this time. It looked like a full-body harness, connected to cables running deep into the station's walls. A thin silver mask hung above it, shaped to fit a human face. Lights blinked along its sides, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. Kev stood off to the side, motionless. His hands were clasped tightly. Trell stood at the console, as calm as always. "You requested this session?" Alara asked, wary. Trell nodded. "We will perform a full-scale suppression today. Longer duration. Deeper access. The goal is to observe emotional absence and return over extended time." "You mean shut me down?" she said flatly. "Emotion," Trell said, "continues to interfere with our analysis. This will clear the distortion." Kev stepped forward suddenly. "It's too dangerous. You don't know what extended suppression will do to a human mind." Trell turned. "Your role is observational, not advisory." "I've observed enough," Kev said quietly. Alara looked between them. Her chest tightened. She should refuse. Walk away. But something told her this was the moment. Not just for the research, but for everything. The whole reason she came here. If she didn't go through this, if she didn't show them the depth of emotion, both when it was there and when it was gone, they would never understand. "Not really. I'll do it," she said, stepping toward the machine. Cav's jaw tensed. "You don't have to prove anything." "Yes, I do," Alara whispered. She climbed into the harness. The mask lowered over her face, sealing in place. Cold spread along her spine. The room dimmed. "Begin," Trell said. Everything vanished. There was no sound, no memory, no meaning. She could hear words, but didn't understand them. Feel her breath, but not her fear. Her body was alive, her mind awake, but her heart was gone. She remembered her brother's face, but it meant nothing. She thought of her mother's voice and felt no warmth. The music in her head was just noise. The drawing was only lines. Alara existed without feeling. To the Varelians, this was progress. To her, it was death without dying. Outside the chamber, Cav watched her monitors dip into silence. Her brainwaves flattened. Her pulse slowed. She is shutting down, he said, alarm rising in his voice. She is stable, Trell replied. This isn't understanding, Cav said. This is destruction. Trell said nothing. Inside the machine, a flicker stirred in Alara's mind. A sound. No, a memory. A soft piano melody. The one she used to play when the world above burned. Her mother's voice, humming beside her. Her brother's laugh. The memory had no weight. Then, suddenly, it did. She felt something small. A spark. The smallest ember of warmth. Emotion. It hit like a wave. Grief, love, fear, and hope, all at once. Her body shook. Her fingers twitched. Her breath caught. The machine beeped wildly. Inside her chest, something lit up. A burst of memory and meaning. She didn't try to stop it. She screamed. The sound shattered through the station's audio feeds. Lights flickered. Systems shorted. Doors slammed shut. Consoles rebooted. The emotional surge had overloaded the network. The chamber opened with a hiss. Alara fell forward, gasping, sobbing. Cav rushed to catch her before she hit the floor. I felt everything, she said through her tears. All at once. It came back. Cav looked up at Trell. You saw it. You recorded it. But can you explain it? Trell's face was unreadable. The lights flickered above him, echoing the chaos of the moment. Alara clung to Cav's arm, shaking. It's not a glitch. It's life. Cav helped her up. You don't need a machine to see that. Alarms rang in the background. The station's systems struggled to stabilize. Emergency lights cast red across the walls. Trell stepped forward slowly. His voice was quiet. You were gone. Then you returned. What? Alara looked him in the eye. Because I remembered who I am. And I chose to feel. Trell said nothing. For the first time, his silence wasn't empty. Alara stood tall, though her legs trembled. You can't study emotions from the outside, she said. You have to live them. Risk them. Feel them. The room went still. No one moved. No one spoke. The spark had been lit. And it wasn't going out. The lights on Ethra flickered long into the cycle that followed the surge. Systems reset one by one. But something had changed, not in the machines, but in the people. Or rather, the beings. Alara sat quietly in the recovery chamber. Her body ached. Her chest felt hollow and full at the same time. She sipped from a metallic cup of nutrient broth, though she couldn't taste much of anything. Not because of the food, but because her thoughts were still heavy, raw. Kev sat across from her, silent. He had barely left her side since the incident. I thought I was going to disappear, Alara whispered. You came back, Kev said. She nodded. Because I remembered. Not logic. Not instruction. A memory. That's what brought me back. Kev looked at her with a strange expression. His black eyes, usually still and deep, were brighter. Focused. Searching. There is a thing I do not understand, he said carefully. Why did that memory matter more than the others? Alara reached into her pocket. She pulled out the folded drawing. Her brother's son, the little smiling stick figures underneath it. The paper was soft from time and touch. This saved me, she said. Not the drawing itself, but what it carried. Kev leaned forward. What did it carry? Love, Alara said simply. Hope. The memory of someone who believed in something better. He was 6 years old, and he never saw the real sun. But he still drew it, every day. She unfolded the drawing and held it out. This is why emotions matter. They remind us who we are. They carry us through pain. Kev stared at the picture. It is, not symmetrical. No, it's human. Just then, Trell entered the chamber. Alara tensed. Kev straightened. Trell's face, as always, was unreadable, but he didn't carry a tablet or data reader this time. His hands were empty. I have reviewed the recordings, he said. Alara said nothing. Trell walked forward and stopped in front of her. He looked down at the drawing. You claim this image, this act of memory, restored your consciousness. I don't claim it, she said. I know it. Trell's voice lowered slightly. I viewed the moment. You named the drawing. You recalled laughter, warmth. You felt pain. And returned. Yes. He looked up. That is difficult to measure. It's not meant to be measured. It's meant to be felt. Trell reached into the folds of his robe and brought out a small object, a digital display cube. I accessed the Earth archives. I found a file. It was from a human child, recorded before the collapse of the Terran surface. He pressed the cube. A holographic image appeared. It showed a child, no more than 5, holding a toy starship. She was laughing, looking at someone off camera. Then she said, "One day I'll fly up there and wave at the stars, even if they don't wave back." The image looped again. Alara's eyes watered. She looked at Trell. "You found that?" Trell nodded. "I do not understand why that sentence causes a reaction. It is a meaningless wish, spoken into a void." "But it's not meaningless," Alara said. "It's hope. It's imagination. It's the belief that even in a broken world, there's something beautiful left." Trell was silent for a long time. Then he said, "I experienced something while viewing it." A pause. A stillness. A pressure in my chest. Alara stared. "You felt something." "I do not know the word," he said. "But I have replayed the image 700 times." Kev looked at Trell. "Maybe that's the beginning." Trell turned to Alara again. "I will not proceed with further suppression trials." She let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "We will begin a new process," he continued. "Observation, yes, but now, participation. Voluntary. Emotional experiences. Direct interaction." "You want to feel them?" she asked. "I wish to understand," Trell corrected. Then, after a pause, "and perhaps, to feel." Cav smiled faintly. Trell turned and left without another word. Alara sat back, still holding the drawing. "It's working," Cav said. "It's just a start," Alara replied. She looked around the chamber. Cold metal. Silent walls. Stillness. And yet, something had shifted. Not in the machines. In them. The emotionless station had felt a spark. It had seen a memory. And it had started to feel. The days that followed were different. The hallways of Ethra, once silent and sterile, now carried sound. Soft music drifting from Alara's quarters, low conversation between researchers, even laughter from Cav during one of their study sessions. It was quiet, cautious, but unmistakably human. The change began with the drawing. Trell had placed it on display in one of the observation rooms. Not behind glass or under scanner lights, but simply pinned to the wall. He called it the catalyst. Not because of its artistic value, it was still just uneven lines and stick figures, but because of what it represented. A moment of feeling. Other Varelians began visiting the room. They stood for long minutes staring at the drawing. Some asked questions. Others stood in silence. One reached out and gently touched the paper, then withdrew with a soft, almost reverent motion. Cav visited daily. He brought his own sketches now, strange, abstract things that didn't follow symmetry or logic. But when he showed them to Alara, he waited for her reaction. "It's not a sun," she said once, looking at a jagged spiral he had drawn. "But it feels like heat, like energy." He nodded. "Then it works." Trell, too, began changing. Slowly. He no longer barked orders or delivered cold lectures. He asked questions now, not just to gather data, but to listen. He sat with Alara during her stories and sometimes didn't take any notes at all. Once, he admitted he had replayed the child's starship recording over 1,000 times. "I do not understand why it affects me," he said one evening. "Because it's real," Alara replied. "Because it touches something beyond reason." He looked away for a moment. "Then I wish to be touched by more." So Alara taught. She brought music files into the labs. She shared old Earth videos, birthday parties, dancing in the rain, a mother reading to her child. She even told them about grief, not just as pain, but as proof of love. The Varelians listened. Not all of them understood, but none of them interrupted. Then, one day, Trell approached her with a proposal. "We wish to create a new chamber," he said. "Not for research. For preservation." Alara blinked. "A museum?" "Not quite. A space where emotions can exist. Freely. A room not for testing, but for remembering." She smiled. "A place to feel." They called it the Heart Room. Cav oversaw the design. Alara filled it with human artifacts, drawings, songs, stories, recordings, and poems. There were even holograms of sunrises and ocean waves, things the Varelians had never seen with their own eyes, but now wanted to understand. Visitors came. Slowly at first, then more each day. Some left confused. Others left changed. On her final morning aboard Ethra, Alara stood in the Heart Room alone. She looked around at the items on display. Her brother's drawing. A music player. A single photo of her family, taken long before the world fell apart. She heard footsteps behind her. Cav entered, holding a small case. "You're leaving," he said. "I've done what I came to do," she replied. "It's time for others to feel what I've felt." He opened the case. Inside was a small hand-carved figure, a star with wings. "I made this," he said. "It's not logical, not balanced, but it felt right." Alara smiled and took it gently. "It's perfect." He nodded slowly, then asked, "Will you return?" "One day," she said. "But you don't need me anymore." Kev looked around the room. "Maybe, but we needed you to start." As she turned to go, Trell met her at the docking bay. He gave her a nod. Nothing more. But in his eyes, there was depth, understanding, perhaps even something like gratitude. She boarded the shuttle. As it pulled away from Ithra, she looked back at the silver station, now slightly warmer, slightly brighter, more alive. She opened her notebook and wrote, "They came to study us. But in the end, they began to feel. That is enough." Far below, Earth waited. A place of memories. A place of emotion. And now, above it, a space station filled with hearts learning to beat.